All right, welcome to Halitics. I'm Hal Ginsberg, and it is a Monday, and maybe a minute or two past noon, starting up here on this Thanksgiving Day week. Apologize for that delay. It was a little tough. I've talked about this before. Sometimes it's a little bit challenging for me to get going in the morning. And over the weekend, I told you I was going to be participating in some events in support of Palestine and against the Israeli genocide, and I did that. And I have to admit, it kind of put me in a kind of a down mood, a little bit harder to get going than other times, just kind of a depressed situation. Because I think it's just that there isn't the kind of horror at what our government is supporting. And that is what so disappoints me. I do call today's program, Does She Have Stockholm Syndrome? That was the thumbnail. There's an image of AOC because I think she's kind of representative of a government where there are some decent people. And I think she probably went into it. Look, I don't know anything about her. A lot of people said she's just a pure opportunist, and she saw a progressive lane back in 2018 that she could exploit with the Justice Democrats to join Congress. Maybe that's true, but it does appear that she has some genuine pro-life leanings, pro-people, pro-worker leanings, pro-peace leanings, but they've just been overwhelmed by the influence of money, by the power, the intoxication of being there in Washington, watching the sausage being made, and you lose sight of why you're there. And at the same time, I think you lose your power, your influence, because what power do you have if all you're doing is providing a backstop for Nancy Pelosi and Barack Obama and Hakeem Jeffries? What real influence do you have to make things better, which is presumably why she went into it, why AOC went into it. So I asked, does she have Stockholm Syndrome? Because I wonder whether she has kind of adopted the mindset of the oppressor, of the power class, those who are wielding all of the wealth, all of the influence, really, that makes a difference. I mean, obviously, it's not 100%. I mean, there is other, power centers and wealth in this country besides what the billionaire elites control, but it's not that much. And, it's every day, every week, every month, the power, the influence of the working class fades even more, and the middle class as well. We see it everywhere. So here's your headline from Bernama, which I'm going to assume is a Burma, but I don't know. Maybe it's not. I don't know where Bernama is, but they're quoting from Anadolu Ajansi, which is a Turkish news service. 24 more Palestinians killed in the past 24 hours, I guess, as of this midnight. And we see the total coming up to 44,235 identified dead. And that includes 135 identified more killed Palestinians by Israel since Friday, when I last gave you a number. Actually, that would have been as of Friday midnight, Thursday, turn of to Thursday into Friday. So that's it's going to say as of midnight, Israel. The Biden-Harris. And of course, I keep saying Biden-Harris because they're still in charge. And I'm going to just say as of midnight Friday. We'll put that Friday in there so you can see it. Israel and the Biden-Harris administration killed more than 44,230. And we'll change that to Trump once he takes power. Hopefully, maybe he'll do something. He says he can pick up the phone and tell Bibi to stop it. And maybe he will. We can only cross our fingers. But again, it's so disheartening, so disappointing. I was at this event. It was very, very moving. Some Palestinians, but I mean, maybe there were 30, 35 folks there. Some Palestinians, a lot of allies were at this event, other Muslims and people of various faiths, to show our solidarity. And there was a little meditation at the end, which was kind of powerful. It did something for me, this healing circle. I guess, anything where you're together with other people who share your version, your vision, your version of where we are, your vision of humanity can make a difference. I was at a Jewish Voice for Peace event yesterday, and I do urge folks, hey, join a group that is staunchly opposed to the genocide. Do what you can. Do it if it's in your power to stand up in any way. I urge you to. We need to be together against the empire, against the genocide. By the way, Emogi, thank you for that watermelon. Like that very much. Yes, that was the symbol. Of course, the colors, the black, the red, and the green are the symbols of Palestine. AOC, let me just get back to her, is one of the few, I don't even know, besides maybe Rashida Tlaib and maybe a few others, Ilhan Omar, who are willing to call out Israel for committing a genocide. But she has also frequently failed to hold them responsible, to take the necessary steps, to do what she can to use her power and influence. And we've seen this over and over, her full unwavering support for Joe Biden, and then her full unwavering support for Kamala Harris, both genociders. How can she be against genocide? This is something Dr. Butch Ware, one of the Green Party candidates, he was the vice president on the ticket, vice presidential candidate on the ticket with Jill Stein. What he said was, how can you be anti-genocide but for a genocider? And I do ask that question both of AOC and, of course, of Bernie. And really all the Democrats. I don't think Rashida Tlaib, she's the only one, as far as I know, who did not endorse Kamala. That said, she did vote for Hakeem Jeffries, who is a staunch AIPACer, to be the Democratic leader in the House. So again, she's got blood on her hands as well. Here, AOC does, back about a week ago, and we may have covered this, she said that one of the lobby groups, lobbying organizations, the big money interest that are responsible for the Democratic losses, not just Harris, but other representatives as well, losing, could be traced to AIPAC, that they're pushing very unpopular policies on the party, and it's following those. And she got dragged for it, as the New York Post says in this AOL reprint. She got dragged, people saying, oh, stop blaming Jews for your problems. Well, okay, you want to phrase it that way, fine. But here's what she actually said, which is really unexceptional. It's just true, right? I mean, she's hardly my favorite, but she got this right. It didn't really require a rocket scientist either. But what she said is, if you want to talk about Congress being overly influenced by a special interest group with a wildly unpopular agenda, then discuss AIPAC. And I read that and I thought, is that a little strong to call it a wildly unpopular agenda? We'll get to that in a moment. But regardless, I give her credit. Yes, good on you. There's so much money that's AIPAC wields. I mean, it's not, it's kind of a way late and way short. And if she really believed that, wouldn't she have, said, hey, I can't support politicians who are completely controlled by AIPAC? But she, to a degree, has clearly bent her knee to the Zionist lobby as well. We covered here in great detail how she platformed, she centered to American Zionists, including one Amy Spitalnik from the Holocaust Museum, who basically prevaricated, who just basically said, hey, if you criticize Israel, that's anti-Semitism. And when asked by AOC, well, how can we say we disapprove of what Israel's doing without being anti-Semitic. She even bought into their framing, which is, well, a lot of ways, if you say, Israel has too much influence, Israel is pushing, the agenda through our government. Israel is committing genocide. Israel is committing its own Holocaust. We can't say any of that according to the her guess, AOC. So what can we say? They just didn't answer. There was no answer. It was just, well, we're concerned as anything you say is often used by Jew haters. Well, if you don't want Jew haters to be empowered, then stop killing Palestinians. Stop your ethnic cleansing. Stop colonizing another country. Stop your genocide. And then, if people criticize Jews, well, you'll have a pretty good argument that it's anti-Semitic. But when the Jewish state, the self-proclaimed, self-described, self-identified Jewish state is committing genocide, then I don't know how you can be surprised that people are going to say things that you call anti-Semitic. 240-242-5646 if you want to join me. Don't forget, click like, click subscribe. Would love to talk to you. So I don't know if Murdoch, if the New York Post is a Murdoch media, maybe. It used to be, I believe. But where she said that support for Israel, or what is it, AIPAC has a wildly unpopular, that's what, AIPAC has a wildly unpopular agenda. I was like, is it really that unpopular? I wish it were that unpopular. But when I talk to friends, relatives, I see on social media, activists, Democrats, wherever, criticizing AIPAC, yeah, you get somewhere, but not very far. Not very far. Doesn't seem like people are willing to or able to see this group, which is pure defender. It's not even an apologist. They're not even making excuses for Israel's genocide. They're just denying it, defending it. Defending the atrocities. Well, this is what happens when you go into another country and you start raping and pillaging and murdering. So I guess that's their explanation, excuse. Israel needs to be safe. So that's what AIPAC is, right? And an organization that's consistently lobbying for an unlimited supply of military hardware, killing weaponry, going to Israel. So that's who they are. And one would hope, I would hope that as Americans, we would be horrified. But I don't know that we are. Here's what the AOL New York Post says. Remember, you can't, their propaganda, their Hezbollah for Israel. But they write, AOC's claim that support for Israel is unpopular isn't accurate. So do you see what they did there? AOC never said support for Israel is unpopular. She said AIPAC is wildly unpopular. She didn't say support for Israel is unpopular. So what the Post is trying to do there is conflate Israel and AIPAC, and they note that 81% support Israel over Hamas. Well, that's not surprising given how much attention, media attention, October 7th got, how much that it has been regurgitated and over, and you had these images. There was some traveling roadshow where you see horrific images and descriptions of what happened on October 7th. So it's not surprising, but that's really not AIPAC. That's Israel. And AOC didn't say Israel was wildly unpopular. She said AIPAC was. And she said AIPAC's agenda was wildly unpopular. So I was skeptical. I thought, I hate to say it. I hate to believe the worst of my fellow Americans, but maybe she's wrong. By the way, this is not in any way a defense of AOC. I do question really whether she has some kind of Stockholm syndrome, which is where you start to identify with your persecutors, the people who torture you, the people who abuse you. It's where prisoners start to identify with the prison guards, believe that the prison guards are justified in cracking down on them, on throwing cold water on them, on making them work without pay, all that. That's what the Stockholm Syndrome is. And so I wonder whether maybe AOC went into Congress in 2018 and over time, they've worn her down to the point where she doesn't even know what's right and what's wrong. You have to kind of question that. She did seem to know what was right and what was wrong when she went after AIPAC. And here's the proof that she got a lot of it right. Here, this is from a CBS News YouGov poll. Now, again, YouGov is online. I don't know how totally credible YouGov is, but these numbers are eye-opening. They were eye-opening to me. I had no idea. This did not get a lot of media attention. Surprise, surprise. The pro-Israel media that, basically we all consume, Washington Post, New York Times, CNN, whatever. I don't watch CNN, but to the extent I get my news online, a lot of it, to the extent I get my news from various sources, those two, New York Times and Washington Post, are probably my primary go-to sources. CBS News poll, June 5th through 7th. How much of a factor is each of these in your vote for president? So they identify several issues. I was surprised. Look at this. 78% of Americans say and they call it a war between Israel and Hamas. It's really a war by Israel on Palestine for sure. But okay, call it what you will. This is an important issue for Americans. 78% back in June said that they were considering it, including over a third saying it's a major factor. It certainly was for me, right? I mean, that was the factor that ultimately determined my vote against Kamala and in favor of Jill Stein. I think many others feel the same way. We certainly saw that, for example, in Michigan and many young voters as well. So that policy, the Biden-Harris policy of unwavering support for Israel's genocide, was very important in the race. So was it popular? Was it unpopular? Well, let's look a little more details here. This is, again, very interesting what the respondents said. And again, the YouGov poll, it's an online poll. It's not where you call. It's not the gold standard. But I think it gives you a kind of a real vibe, a real feel for where, especially since it's online, I'm going to assume that it has a disproportionate surveying of, the numbers are skewed somewhat in favor of younger voters, skews youth. So of the folks who answered back in June, 59% wanted Biden to say to Israel, stop, cut back, less killing, less murders. 37% said stop altogether. 22% said decrease the actions, cut back. So again, AIPAC, which is saying, go Israel, do whatever you want. Continue. That's not a popular position. That was not a popular position in June. And we know in the general election, it was not a popular position. So it looks like AOC was onto something when she said that AOC is a very unpopular lobby pushing very unpopular positions. Looks like she was. We can go into this a little bit greater detail because I thought this was an even more emphatic. The answer to this question was an even more emphatic repudiation of the AIPAC agenda. And of course, AIPAC having remarkable influence, remarkably powerful and pernicious, un-American influence over our government. 61% said stop sending weapons and supplies to Israel. Just stop. Which of these should the U.S. do or not do? Should we send weapons and supplies? No. That's what 61% of the respondents to the Econ YouGov. Now, this is a perfect poll. I've been over this before. I always am a little skeptical of online polls. But on the other hand, I couldn't find anything different. I couldn't find, yes, people will say we should support Israel over Hamas. But that doesn't mean they're saying we should support a genocide of the Palestinian people. So again, at least according to this poll, and it's not a crap poll, Econ isn't garbage. It's not Rasmussen. It's not, Trafalgar, a Republican leaning or a Democratic leaning pollster. You read something from Daily Kos, I'm not going to buy it if they did the poll. It's going to clearly skew in a way that the pollsters believe will help the Democrats one way or the other. Maybe they'll say, oh, it's super close, when it's not, because they want to raise more money or for whatever reason get people out. Who knows? I don't trust those polls at all. I don't even, I don't trust them to be leaning one way or another. In other words, if it's a poll by, say, Rasmussen, that's a House Republican poll. So they're not, you can't even say, well, they shade one way or the other. They have a narrative that they want to present to you, and they use the numbers to present that narrative. That I don't trust. Econ they may not be the most accurate, but I don't think that they're deliberately targeting, skewing the numbers to reach a separate, a predetermined result. That said, when AOC says that the AIPAC agenda is unpopular, got some powerful evidence, powerful survey to back her. And yet, she was, as the New York Post said, dragged for that. This was a week ago. That she went after AIPAC. And what did she do on, it was Thursday. So this was after she got slammed by conservative media, by the Jewish Daily, the Jewish Lobby. I was looking at their newsletter I got, how she's been hearing it for being anti-Semitic, dangerous tropes. So what does she do? She votes to back a dangerous, dishonest definition of anti-Semitism that is being promoted by the International Holocaust Museum. And that is, of course, where that Spitalnik comes from, the woman she centered over the summer. You gotta wonder, was she like, oh my God, I get it, I'm getting hit. These people are going after me. There's all sorts of social media attacks against me. I don't like it. It hurts. And I get it. It does. No one wants it. And you do question. People go after me and say, well, you don't care about poor people. You don't care about working people because you support taxes on fossil fuels. Well, maybe they got a point. I don't think it's completely absurd to say that. So when you get attacked, when you're personally demeaned, it hurts. And maybe she's hurt. I get that. And what does she do? She backs this bogus definition of anti-Semitism, a definition that does much more harm and no good at all. Lots of harm, no good at all. By the way, 240-242-5646 would love to talk to you. And don't forget, click like, click subscribe. I will probably be on 4 days this week. I told you last Friday, but there's a chance I'll be off maybe Friday as well this week. I haven't made a final decision, but I'm going to really effort at least to get through Wednesday. Again, it's been a little rough for me because I just am not seeing and I'll give you, I was at this event, before we get to more about anti-Semitism and AOC and how she backs this totally bogus definition. Just a couple of quick little billboards. Maybe they'll come up later in the program. One will anyway, I believe. So I was at the Jewish Voice for Peace event yesterday, and I'd been to one last month. And I really think these are the best people. They're really caring. They're good people. They stand against Israel. They stand in support of the Palestinian people. So I have a lot of, affinity. But, and I see this on social media all the time, there's an inability, there really is an inability to see the Democratic Party as part of the cancer that is metastasizing throughout our entire body politic, but that is behind that cancer that's destroying our nation and our world. And there's various forms of cancer that we as a nation and we as a world are suffering from, whether it's the cancer of ecological collapse, driven largely but not wholly by the climate holocaust, whether it's the cancer of genocide and ethnic cleansing, whether it's the cancer of rampant inequality, starvation, slave labor, endless war. These are the various cancers that are killing us as a species and as a planet, as a biosphere. There's a failure, in my view, and it breaks my heart, because this has been my kind of goal, not when I started at KRXA 540 AM back in 2005, but as time progressed. I was on there for 9 years there. And as time progressed, I more and more began to see how guilty, how complicit the Democratic Party was. I still believed, though, that at that time, there was a chance to redeem the party. And that belief was reinforced in 2016 during the success, during the period of time when Bernie Sanders' campaign enjoyed some real successes. It didn't completely die even in 2020 when Sanders was defeated by the overwhelming efforts of the corporate Democratic elites, Obama, Pelosi, etc. But what really put the nail in it was what really hurt that year too was the fact that Bernie could have won. The fact is Democrat voters did not have to do what Barack Obama told them to do. Democrat voters did not have to do what Jim Clyburn told them to do, which is to vote for Joe Biden. And yet they did. So that was very, very painful for me. Even still, there was this kind of, maybe we can make a difference. That's gone. This party is not redeemable. It's beyond redemption. And you can see it in just so many different areas, whether, again, climate change. It's now really the party of war, worse than the Republicans. So I don't want to get into all the details of that. If you call me, we can talk about it. But what really hurt me is when I'm at this JVP meeting, and many of these really good, caring, decent people, smart people, they can't see the Democratic Party as part and parcel, as part of the etiology of that cancer. They still cling to the notion that Kamala and Hillary would have been better. We'd be in a better place if only we, and maybe marginally you can make arguments. But we would still be circling the drain. The policies that they support, that they have throughout their careers, have been devastating. And yet there's still this belief, this wish fulfillment thinking, I think, this wishful thinking, this delusional thinking that the Democratic Party can save us. Maybe not the way it is right now. And yes, there's a lot of bad apples in that barrel. But the worst Democratic apple in the barrel, so goes that thinking, isn't as bad as Donald Trump. The worst apple in that barrel, if they were in charge, we would have a better country, okay? And that is not going to solve our problem. That's only engaging in that kind of belief system rather than recognizing the Unitary Party is the problem, is a huge part of the problem, represents the party, the problem. We can't solve the problem. So therefore, that breaks my heart. It's, again, how are we going to, and I've spent so much time, so much effort, so much energy to bring this view to others with kind of questionable results. And people don't want to hear, right? I mean, I'm not saying you can't talk to Democratic shills about this. They will just lose it. They won't come on this program. They won't talk to me. They don't want to hear about it. It's very upsetting. They hang up. Here's the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance. I guess that's what it's called. I don't know what it's called. The museum definition. Anti-Semitism. Now, I don't really have a problem with this. I mean, I think it's kind of meaningless, and I wish we weren't so focused on the politics of grievance, right? The politics of hurt. I'm hurt. Someone said something I don't like. They looked at me funny. It's because I'm a Jew. It's because I'm black. It's because I'm trans. It's because they think I'm gay. Whatever it is. I wish we could move past that. I just don't think it's helpful. I think in the end, the victimhood industry is making things worse. Sure, I don't like what you said to me. I don't like how you looked at me. Fine. But then to take the next step, it's because you hate Jews. No, you don't need to go there. You don't need to attribute motives. You don't know what people's motives are most of the time. And maybe they had a bad taste in their mouth from lunch. So they looked at you kind of funny. Who knows? We don't know. So I would prefer not to spend all of our time focusing on this. But look, the fact is there is hate. People do hate each other based on what group they're a member of. People hate many viewers people who watch my video, well, there aren't that many, but those who do, some of you probably hate people who voted for Trump. You can't take it. How could they do this? It's so wrong. They're taking away my right to have an abortion, which really isn't even true. But okay, that's, it becomes so personal that you take it that way. That doesn't help. You want to solve problems, let's identify them and work on them to address the problem. Somebody looks at you funny, ask them, tell them you didn't like it. That's all you have to do. So all that said, yes, anti-Semitism is real. It does exist. I don't believe it's on the upswing. I don't believe ADL. I don't believe professional Jewish victims. I don't believe them. But yeah, it's there. It's a certain perception of Jews which may be expressed as hatred towards Jews. Well, I don't know what else it would be except hatred towards Jews, right? What else would be anti-Semitic? I mean, they're going to say, well, if you think Jews are too powerful or you're this or you're that, well, there are a lot of powerful Jews. It's true. There are a lot of Jews who are driving policy. You can't say that's not true. So I don't know what anti-Semitism is except hating Jews. And then they give you these kind of examples. I know it when I see it as kind of the argument. Rhetorical and physical manifestations are directed towards Jews or non-Jewish, non-Jews, and or their property, community institutions, and religious facilities. It's so vague, right? It doesn't really tell you anything. But what does tell you, this is the definition that AOC voted for. Virtually every Democrat, I think. The only two who didn't were Tlaib and Omar. Only two. Wow. So it's vague. It doesn't really tell you much. We don't know what it means. It's relevant, even though it doesn't have a lot of binding authority. But this goes to the question of what is a hate crime, too. If we're going to charge people with hate crimes, then I think many jurisdictions embrace that government, that U.S. government definition of anti-Semitism. And if you act based on anti-Semitism as defined by the federal government, then you're committing a hate crime. or you could be. You still have to commit a crime. You have to do something else, but we'll get into that. So this is tough for me. We'll get more into that definition in a sec. But yes, so when in Wyoming, Matthew Shepard was murdered because he's gay, right? He was at a bar. He tried to pick up some cowboys or something. I'm not really clear. Or there were some homophobes were there to attack him, and they killed him. And you could say, and I would have said, and I do say, well, do we need a hate crime? Do we need to have an accelerant or add to the punishment? I mean, murder is murder. It's the ultimate crime. That's what they did. Does it really matter that he's gay? And I have to say, yes, I think it matters, because that was the reason for the killing. And victims of hate crimes and their communities are terrorized. Now, every crime can terrorize a community. You have somebody who's a burglar, right? A second-story guy, and they're going to people's houses on a block or in a neighborhood and robbing them and burglarizing them. The whole neighborhood is traumatized to a degree, but I don't think it's quite the same. I get that. So I understand the reason behind the legislation. I understand why you would want to identify anti-Semitism. I just think it's something that we don't need to focus on to the degree that we do. And I think often by doing it, we make things worse, rather than looking at what drives to a significant degree hate. And it's resentment. It's a sense that you're not being treated fairly, that you're being left behind. Sometimes that sense is not accurate. Sometimes it is. In this country, the working class is absolutely being left behind. The people who don't have anything beyond a high school education are being left behind. Their lives are far less rich. And I don't mean rich like having money. I mean they're far less excitement, pleasures, variety. If you're not, if you don't have a college degree or more, if you don't have probably $1 million even, a significant amount of assets, your life isn't going to be that great. People say, how could you say $1 million? You want to own your own home in California on the coast or near the coast, it's going to be over $1 million. Same with New York City, New York area. Places that are desirable and because they're pretty, they have a lot of burgeoning cultural scene. If you're going to retire, $1 million ain't going to do it in most places. People are paying 6 figures to live in a decent retirement community. That's where we are as a society, and most Americans don't have anywhere near that kind of money. Half of us have under 10K. So we've created this society where there's just a remarkable divergence between those who have and those who don't, and most don't. That's going to breed hatred. That's going to breed anger. That's going to breed conspiracy theories, bigotry, resentment. We don't want anti-Semitism. We don't want racism. We don't want homophobia, transphobia, or we want to have the ability to address those. We got to deal with this. We've got to deal with inequality, injustice. All right, back to that definition there of anti-Semitism and why I think it's so problematic in so many ways. So one of the hallmarks, according to the International Holocaust Remembrance of, and I don't think this is the worst example, but I disagree with it. I don't think this, if you deny the fact, scope, mechanisms or intentionality of the genocide by the Nazis, I don't necessarily conclude that's anti-Semitism. And I'll give you an example of why. I was reading this. When I was in high school, college, the center of the mass murder of the Jews was understood to be Auschwitz and the concentration camps. And the number killed at Auschwitz, as I recall in Lucy Davidovitz's War Against the Jews, was somewhere close to 3 million, maybe not quite that many, 2 million, 2.5 million. So that was and they even say the mechanisms, gas chambers. Yes, there were gas chambers, no question about it. And the total death count by the Nazis was estimated right after the war to be around 6 million, 5 to 6 million, and I think that number stays. But the mechanisms are understood to be a little different today. For example, the primary killing mechanism, I think, is now understood to be machine gun squads. The Wehrmacht and the SS troopers who went into Eastern Europe and just shot Jews dead. They would march them up to pits and kill them. The total death count apparently at Auschwitz has been ratcheted down from well over 2 million to somewhere around 1.8 million. This is what I understand. Maybe I'm getting these facts wrong. So there is a historical revision of numbers. And no one's going to say that it's anti-Semitic, or they shouldn't say, to look and say, well, maybe there weren't quite as many killed in Auschwitz as we said, and there were more killed in Ukraine, right? I mean, I don't feel like that's anti-Semitic in any way. History does lead to changing views. Now, I don't think you should deny the Holocaust occurred. I think that's wrong. I know there are people who have done that. I do think they were anti-Semitic. But you can, I believe, have doubts about the specific mechanisms or question the history as it's come down. So this is, to me, not a particularly problematic example of anti-Semitism, problematic definition, but it's not perfect. So I don't love it, shall we say. But let me get to some that I have more of a problem with. So I highlighted these two bullets here, but the top one, yeah, that's anti-Semitic. If you say you invented or exaggerated it, that's, you say Jews are making this up. That's anti-Semitic, let's face it. And it'd be like if Native Americans said, oh yeah, you didn't, or people say of the indigenous peoples, oh yeah, they weren't even here. This land was totally empty. There were just a few tribes, and they weren't, they were uncivilized. So they're better off now. You say that, that's clearly racist and horrible. So the same about the Holocaust. But where I have a problem with this is where they say that you can't accuse Jewish citizens. So it's not just all Jews. Like, if you say all Jews are inventing or exaggerating the Holocaust, that clearly is anti-Semitic as far as I'm concerned. But if you say, well, one Jewish person is overstating it, well, that's not necessarily anti-Semitic. So if you accuse, like, for example, if someone said, well, every single Jew in Germany was murdered, that would not be true. But the Jewish people aren't saying that, but maybe somebody would say it. And if you said, well, that person's exaggerating, that wouldn't be anti-Semitic. And by the way, it wouldn't be under the definition, because it's only if you accuse the Jews as a people, not individual people. But here, if you accuse any Jewish citizen, according to the International Holocaust Museum's definition, or Remembrance Association's definition, if you accuse Representative Josh Gottheimer, hey, you're more loyal to Israel than you are to the United States. According to the IHRA, that's anti-Semitic. You're accusing a Jewish citizen of being more loyal to Israel than to his own country. Well, I think it's pretty clear that he is, right? I think it's pretty clear that there are many Jewish people who seem more loyal, many Jewish Americans who seem to care more about Israel than the United States, who want to see tens of billions of dollars of military supplies go to Israel when we have hungry people in this country, when we have unhoused people in this country. How is that unfair to say to them, you're prioritizing Israel over Americans? They are. And yet, according to AOC, that's anti-Semitic. So why? I mean, she's not stupid. She didn't have to vote for that definition. Ilhan Omar didn't. Rashida Tlaib didn't. And AOC's not in any kind of a risky or dangerous, or, her seat isn't precarious. She got close to 70% of the vote. And even if it were, she could stand up and say, no, I'm not going to vote for this definition, which is clearly bogus. And she didn't. So why would she? Is it because she's got some kind of Stockholm syndrome? Has she internalized the criticisms of her? Maybe. I mean, I wonder. Is that unfair? And I don't think it's just her. It's the entire left. Oh, we can't be accused of helping elect Trump. We can't support Jill Stein because people are going to attack us. Yeah, so we're not going to. So we've internalized the criticism. Are there Jewish Americans who put Israel first ahead of their own country? Well, look at this. Jewish Democrat Council of America says it right out loud, or, well, in print. Clear majority of Senate Democrats support Israel arms sales. Well, most Americans don't. Remember, we showed you that poll. It said, 59% want us to push Israel to do less, killing, and 61%, we should stop supplying Israel. Yet a clear majority of Jewish Democrats and all Democrats support Israel arms sales. How can you argue that the priority isn't Israel over the United States? And yet, again, that's anti-Semitic. All right, this is also, according to AOC's definition and the federal government's definition, anti-Semitic. And this one is really wrong. This is really horrific. You can't compare contemporary Israeli policy to Nazi policy. Why not? That makes no sense to me. They're identical in certain ways, right? Israel wants to colonize Gaza. Israel wants to colonize the West Bank. Israel is colonizing the West Bank. How is that different from the Lebensraum policy that the Nazis pursued, which was to clear Eastern Europe of Slavs and other undesirables, especially Jews, but also Gypsies, and resettle with German speakers, Germanic peoples? They're exactly the same policy. How is the genocide of the Nazis not comparable? We've had many Holocaust survivors who said flat out. And yet this is considered anti-Semitic, and AOC voted for it. she knows better. Why did she do that? Is it just pure politics? Is she really that craven? Did she just say, well, this is BS? Or has she somehow internalized, as have maybe many other lawmakers, many other Democrats? If this is the case, I don't know how we can continue to support the Democratic Party. We need another party. We need a bulwark against this. Because it's not just the Republicans. It's not like there's a party together that's standing against the propaganda. The party is actually going after AOC herself. That's why she probably does have some Stockholm Syndrome. This is why we must unite behind another power center, another power structure. There's just no way around this solution. I mean, there just isn't. Otherwise, things will continue to get worse. All right, it's already almost 1, but let me continue a little bit. I'm going to move on to a slightly different story. I mentioned this Friday, so there was an arrest warrant sworn out for Bibi for genocide. And this is very interesting. This came out Friday. France, Netherlands, to enforce, I-24 I believe is French news, to enforce arrest warrants. In other words, if Bibi tries to go to France or Amsterdam, and I'm really glad to see that with the Netherlands because they have a pretty right-wing government there, and I thought they were pretty supportive. Remember, that mayor of Amsterdam, by the way, came out and said she was apologized for saying there was a Jew hunt during the or in the wake of that Maccabi soccer match in Amsterdam. In fact, it was the Israeli soccer fan hooligans who catalyzed and triggered the riots, which were not anti-Semitic. Jews were not hunted. The Israeli fans, people who were wrapping themselves in Israeli Stars of David and roaming the streets with sticks, they were targeted. That's not anti-Semitism. I was pleased to see this. France, Belgium, Jordan, Netherlands are all saying, I think Spain too, Italy, maybe not Spain, Italy also said they are going to, if Bibi, comes to their countries, he'll get arrested. Now, I don't know if it's true or not. One of the definitions, I guess, of anti-Semitism that AOC signed onto is if you argue that their Jews are too powerful, right? There's like a conspiracy. Jews have too much power over government, right? That can be anti-Semitic if you say that, or that is anti-Semitic if you say that. Well, this is from the Jewish Insider. Bibi rejected France's continued involvement, right? Because there's potential ceasefire. There's ceasefire talks, I guess, although they have gone nowhere. And basically, it's just talks to tell Israel to stop killing people, civilians, women, children, seniors, men. Just stop it, right? And Bibi said, "Well, you know what? You can't be part of this anymore because you said you'd arrest me if I go to France." But guess what? Joe Biden, the Democratic president of the United States, pressured Macron to take a different stance. Now, I don't know what that different stance was. I looked for it. I couldn't find it. There was nothing. And they even say more details to come on this scoop. But the bottom line is the U.S. government is acceding to the demands of the Israeli prime minister, who represents 7 million people, 6 to 7 million, 8 million people in Israel, something like that, maybe 7 million. So how can one look at that fact that this mass murderer, this genocider, Bibi Netanyahu, is able to put the pressure, the screws to the U.S. president, the most ostensibly powerful person in the world, representing 350 million, 50 times as many Americans as there are Israelis. And yet, Biden goes to Macron and says, hey, ease up on all this talk of arresting Bibi for genocide. We're not going to do that. Hey, we're not going to do that. So how can you look at that and not conclude, if it's not Jewish influence, it's a very powerful Israeli influence over our government? But I guess that would be considered anti-Semitic. Or at least you could get attacked for being anti-Semitic for suggesting it. All right, just a few more little points, and I'm going to move on to a different topic. We'll go for a few more minutes. I was concerned, I mentioned this, obviously the genocide is the worst thing that there is right now. Apparently, I read this article, or I saw this headline, that the situation in Sudan is even worse. The humanitarian crisis there is even worse. And it's possible, for sure, right, with the starvation there. My answer is, again, why are we spending billions and billions and billions of dollars so Israel can basically eradicate the Palestinian people? Why are we spending billions and billions of dollars, including sending landmines to Ukraine, when we should be using our foreign money to save lives, to address this crisis in Sudan? Why aren't we doing that? And the answer, whatever answer you come up with, is totally unacceptable, and again, it just reflects how bad things are in this country. Now, unlike other programs, I really try not to traffic too much in, yellow journalism and just very provocative headlines. I really try to come up with solutions. Again, the solution is we have to unite together for an alternative political solution to the Democrats and Republicans. Another example of just how bad the Democrats are, I think this is really interesting. I published this, or posted this, in Halitics on Facebook, which you should join if you're not a member. Just type Halitics in the box and you can join the group. Anyone can. There's no, I do, and I wish I didn't have to, but I do have to do a little bit of judicious, I don't want to call it censoring exactly, but people insult each other that we don't allow. I wanted to keep it a safe place for you to express your views. They can be contentious. They can even be strong, harsh even, against certain parties and leaders of those parties, but not against each other, not against people in the group itself. I made the point, I haven't even talked about the fact that Gates withdrew. He's been, there was a report that came out. Apparently it was never published. It won't be published. But at least one 17-year-old woman, well, she's not 17 now, but she was 17 back in 2017 when Gates was first taking power or took a seat in Congress. She was a prostitute. She was an underage teenage prostitute. She was clearly a victim. She was at a party where she testified she had sex with Gates and got paid for it. So that's illegal for at least two counts. One is statutory rape. She's underage. And two is prostitution. So that came out and Gates decided he was going to withdraw. And, whatever you think of all that, there's no question there was a lot of pressuring. I mean, I don't know that I would have, if I were a Democrat, insisted he step down for that. I would say, listen, charge him with a crime. You didn't charge him. There was an investigation. In fact, Sonny Hostin of The View had to admit this on air. There was an investigation. A criminal investigation was pursued against Gates, and it was dropped. And I believe it was a federal investigation. It wasn't state. So, you got to look at politics, the art of the possible. Would Gates be a better option for the American people, which is, I think, the question the Democrats should ask themselves, than the next choice? That's what I said on this program And my answer is, yeah, I think he would be. In fact, even Salon, Democratic shill, Democratic apologist media, Salon, home of luminaries like Amanda Marcotte, has, and gosh, what is that other guy's name? I can't remember now. He is just toxic on there. I can't remember. I'll see if I can find it. But it's a pretty crappy media. But even Salon says Trump Attorney General pick is worse. Pam Bondi is worse. And I saw these posts in Halitics from people saying, well, she's qualified. I may not like her, but she's qualified. And my response is, what do you care if she's qualified? What you should care about is whether she's going to make things better, worse, or less worse. Who's going to make things worse? Gates wouldn't make things as bad as Bondi, in my opinion. Bondi is just a sociopath. Gates actually has principles. Gates has stood for those principles. Gates said we've got to go after big tech. Gates did join with somebody, it wasn't Bernie, he joined with a Democrat to push hard to stop the Somali genocide by the Saudis. Gates pushed, I think this time with Bernie, to broker a deal to withdraw from Afghanistan. Gates, sleazy, low rent, immoral, fine, all those things. What does that matter compared to trying to get us out of a war that we shouldn't be in, or taking on big tech? Pam Bondi won't do any of that. She's just purely corrupt. She took a $25,000 campaign contribution and then decided she wasn't going to sue Trump University, even though Trump University has taken advantage of the people of her state of Florida. That's her job. And she's been rewarded for that. I don't understand that the nature of politics in America today is you take, especially when we're looking at corrupt, sociopathic individuals, if you got somebody who's going to be on your side on something that's really important, like antitrust, why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you support them? I just don't get that. I so don't get that. All right, final little slide. I want to show this here because I didn't get to this Friday either. I wanted to, though. Well, the Friday didn't get to. I think that came out over the weekend from Salon. I didn't see it, so it wasn't something I didn't get to Friday. But I saw this X on X from Hartman, just an hour. You can see it says 1 hour, but I took that shot. Was it on X, or maybe it was on this new Blue Sky? I guess it was X because it's got the blue check. There's this blue sky, blue check, whatever. So Hartman is decrying the fact that MSNBC may go off the air, or at least in its current format. So the network of Rachel Maddow, of Chris Hayes, Lawrence O'Donnell, Joy Reid, they may be gone like the dodo bird, like the buffalo. And he writes, the end of left-leaning news. Is progressive journalism being systematically dismantled? I think is the word after systematically. I'm not sure about that. Dude, MSNBC isn't progressive. MSNBC isn't left-leaning. MSNBC is the Democratic Party House organ. That's all it is. It's not progressive in any way. They're not for wealth and income redistribution. They're not for peace. They're apologists for the war party. Now, if you want to say, well, okay, I don't really like them, but at least they're for the Democrats, whereas Fox is for the Republicans, so we need a counterbalance, I'm going to say no. Fox and MSNBC are both for the billionaire class. Fox and MSNBC are both for the military-industrial complex. Perhaps, I don't say this will happen, Tom, perhaps if MSNBC does indeed implode, there'll be space for real progressives to emerge from the rubble. I don't say that will happen. I'd be surprised. But who knows? Maybe there'll be a little bit of an opening. I can't understand how somebody like, Tom is a very bright guy. He's written good stuff. He gets that we need Medicare for all. I'm going to assume maybe he too has some of that Stockholm syndrome. He did back Bernie in 2016 and he got it. He heard it from Stephanie and others. Maybe, and he immediately, as soon as Bernie was out in 2016, he pivoted, got Robert Reich on there to tell us how great a president she would be. Did the same with Kamala. You got to wonder, what's in the mind of these people that they see things so wrongly? And have they just missed? Do they just not understand what's really happening? That's the only thing I can come up with. And why have they missed it? Because, they're paid to, it's in their interest to, but also they're kind of beaten down. You got some kind of PTSD or something. All right, that's going to do it for me. Real quick, though, don't forget, do me a solid, please, if you haven't yet, click likes, click subscribe. Any of my new friends, if any of you are watching from either JVP or that I met over the weekend at the healing event, the solidarity event for Palestine, please, subscribe if you haven't done so. Would love to get some new names, new faces, new people in Halitics as well. That'll do it for me. I'll see you tomorrow. Happy holiday week.